welcome to the HorrorVale Q&A. I was practicing that for about an hour. We're here to answer your burning questions that were submitted long ago.
Yeah.
Questions submitted last week and questions submitted today. So the way this is going to work is because most of the questions are going to be applicable to Dustin. I'll be reading the questions and we will go through them in order.
Yeah.
So let's get started with the old Twitter thread.
Alrighty.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, number one. This is from Sticks the Imp at Lemons S Doodle. Tell us about the early parts of development. Were there any challenges / scrapped ideas?
Well, in the very early parts of development, I was basically just like, we were just kind of screwing around, and the first thing that was made was Alice's house, obviously, and I wouldn't say that there was anything necessarily scrapped around that time. I just kind of put in whatever I wanted. Obviously there was a significant challenge because I had never done any sort of map making or game design or anything like that, so I basically had to do all that from the ground up, and a lot of those early areas, they've been changed now, but they looked very, very significantly different than later areas than when I started to learn how to actually draw maps and things like that.
Okay, question numero 2 is from Gaming Boy 2864. That name rings a bell. What made you think about and go through with the addition of scaries to the game? So why scaries? How did they happen?
Well, I would say that the creepies were one of the first concepts that I came up with. The idea of you have these traditional spooky characters that are skeletons and ghosts and zombies and stuff like that, and then they encounter a new type of monster that are based off of creepypastas. And the basic theme was old versus new, and video game horror also fits within that type of new horror, so it just felt like a natural fit to include scaries too.
Okay, number 3. Jordan Louis asks, who was the hardest party member to implement mechanically?
There's a few that were pretty hard. There's obviously Gwen, who is a character that has a customizable moveset. So she has technically more moves than any other character in the game, because even though she can only have 8 at a time, several of those you can swap out with different moves. So I had to make different varieties for every move. Mask Guy was also tough with his summoning mechanic. His original summoning mechanic was actually going to be way more complex than what it is now. Right now, when you summon something with Mask Guy, he basically attacks, and then that changes his form, kind of like that one Pokemon, the sword and the shield, that changes after you attack. It's kind of like that, but originally it was going to basically be like a Persona character where you select a persona and then he uses moves from it. And I would also say that Chris and Tanner Jar were also pretty difficult, mostly because they're not even fully implemented to this day because of the interesting mechanic that they have in place.
Okay. Gabriel Wrigley asks, what is your favorite enemy that you've worked on so far?
I would say, honestly, my favorite enemy is maybe Tall Guy, because when you're in the woods, he just kind of constantly chases you all the time, and it's actually kind of annoying to deal with, but I think it's pretty interesting.
Okay, Axelfire Kirby asks, when will the leaves crunch? Matt, when will they crunch? I've been asking you for years, when will they crunch? We will implement one tile of leaves in the game, which will crunch. You have to find it though, and we're not going to tell you where it is.
I have actually thought about implementing that, but he's asked it many times, and every time I'm thinking I can add that someday, and then I just forget about it. So maybe it will be in there one day.
To be confirmed on the leaves. Okay, this is from Flynn. What was the biggest change outside of Skeleton Manor that you changed in Act 1 demo to full game? So discounting the Skeleton Manor redesign, what was the biggest change?
Well, for sure, the fact that the Forgotten Mansion isn't actually a part of Act 1 anymore. It got completely replaced with a new type of mini dungeon. So that, and in addition, like that whole general area had its layout drastically changed, and I think that the new version will feel a lot better, like pacing wise, and also less people will get lost.
Okay, this is a good one. From Sin Necrofair, why did you change Alice's eye colour?
It's a funny thing. So I have this problem where sometimes I will draw a character incorrectly, and then from then on I will just continue drawing them like that. So I wouldn't say that one day I decided to make her eyes purple. It was more like every time I drew her, her eyes kept getting more and more purple until they were purple, and then by then it was just like I had drawn her like that for so long that they were purple now.
Cool. Same person has more questions. Have there been any major changes to how stats work throughout development?
I mean, I wouldn't say so. I mean, the game is made in RPG Maker, so the stats are, like the numbers and stuff and the math, that's all done in the system, and there's not really been any drastic changes there, I would say. I mean, obviously, in terms of specific characters, stats change as testing goes on and various balances need to be done, but the primary system has basically remained the same.
What's your process for making sprite sheets?
Generally, for most characters, I actually use Wrap Sprite as a base, and then I just kind of trace that and then add more details.
You're getting all the secrets tonight, folks. Okay, what was your biggest inspiration for the game/story/world as a whole?
Well, obviously, I've always been a big fan of Halloween. I would say that the largest two inspirations behind the world are Luigi's Mansion and Nightmare Before Christmas. I've always been like obsessed with that kind of stuff, so it only makes sense that I would make a game with that kind of world.
Our good friend King Rule asks, what things have improved in your art since beginning this project, both visually, storytelling, and music-wise?
Oh, music-wise, there's something in there for you too. I mean, I would say that visually, like in terms of the actual artwork, I've learned a lot about shading, and I've also done a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have normally done because I'm drawing these maps that are very large, and previously when I worked on webcomics, it's mostly like a character focus where you're mainly seeing the characters and stuff like that, and there might be a background, but it's never like too intricate. So I definitely got a lot of experience with designing backgrounds from working on HorrorVale art.
For me, music-wise, I think I just actually learned how to make music because when we started doing HorrorVale, I was a total beginner. It was like I'd made a few tracks that I messed around with, but HorrorVale was like the first serious thing that I embarked on. And at the beginning, I was learning a lot about production, things like EQ, compression, all the behind-the-scenes stuff. So I've learned a lot about that, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning stuff now as I'm making tracks with different things.
And yet, despite your inexperience, you made Spooky Swing.
I can't bring myself to go back and change Spooky Swing. It's kind of production-wise, there's room for improvement, but I don't have the heart to touch it. I've just got to leave it as it is.
I agree.
Okay, Danimation, this is the last Twitter question now, asks, what's your process behind designing the maps?
Well, it's kind of funny that Dan basically knows the answer to this question now because he's actually working on the maps. But for everyone else, the kind of way that I work on maps is I have a grid of 32 by 32 squares, and I kind of put that in a new canvas, and then I do a sketch, like a very rough draft of kind of the layout of where stuff should be, what kind of object should be in it, and then I go in and I do all the line art for all the major stuff, and then later on I'll put in like the objects and stuff like that after everything is colored and shaded and stuff like that.
What made you decide on the art style?
I mean, I wouldn't really say that I made a conscious choice about the art style. It's just kind of a natural thing that happened. In very old concept art, the characters were very different. They were a lot more realistically proportioned. I mean, they were still cartoony, but like Alice and Bolt and stuff like that, they were way taller. They had smaller heads and stuff like that. And just over time, as I started conceptualizing things, they got smaller and smaller and chibier. And then eventually it got to kind of the style that we have today.
I will skip over some questions because we've kind of touched on these things already, and just for the sake of time. So, this is an interesting one. What connections do the both of you have to the horror genre? Or what kind of spooky stuff do you both like / inspires you?
Well, obviously, I talked about the inspirations from Nightmare Before Christmas and Luigi's Mansion. But besides that, I'm actually hugely into horror. I like to collect horror films, and I don't really get scared by them, but I love to watch them and just appreciate like the cinematography and the ambience and stuff like that. And I'm a big fan of like horror games. Probably one of my favorite games of all time is the original Silent Hill on PS1. I just love the sort of atmosphere that those kind of Japanese horror games have. And, I mean, just generally the entire genre, I love it. So I consider HorrorVale as a tribute to the horror genre as a whole. And also, I will point this out that, when I was a teenager, I was hugely into like the creepypastas and like the Slenderman ARGs and stuff like that. So it kind of makes sense to put those things in there as well.
As for me, I'm not mad on horror. I've never been super into it. I mean, I do love Nightmare Before Christmas, but I like, for example, my favourite horror movie is The Shining. I love just super atmospheric stuff, things that are kind of gory and jump scary. That's not my cup of tea, but kind of atmospheric, tense stuff is my thing. And when it comes to games, again, I'm not mad on horror games. I love Dead Space. I played the original Dead Space. I love that game. Dustin enjoys watching me be frightened in video games. He bought me Slender and made me play it and made me stream it, and I was in a state, and I don't do well.
No, I was honestly genuinely afraid that you were like going to have a heart attack when you played that game. And it's not even and it's not even like it's a very simple horror game.
There's something about being immersed in the experience. I don't cope. I just don't do it. So, right, that concludes the Twitter questions. Now we're going to move on to the Discord questions. We're going to go to the pre-asked ones.
Okay.
And we're going to go back to King Rule. Now this could be deep, this one. This is for both of us. What are your motivations for continuing to make this game? And what are some of the ways you deal with or avoid burnout / lack of motivation?
Absolutely, I would say that my major motivation to keep doing it is you guys. If it wasn't for the community that HorrorVale has, I can't say for certain that the game would still be in development today. It's definitely a big motivator when you have people who love what you're making and they want to see more, and also there's a bit of a financial obligation because they've given you money, so you kind of have to see it to the end. And in terms of, obviously there is a level of burnout and lack of motivation that I usually solve with a cup of coffee and forcing myself to do the work.
Good answer. I think for me, motivation-wise, it's changed. At the beginning of HorrorVale, I was kind of trying to make my mark as a composer. This was my goal. I'm going to go out there and establish myself. And that's changed pretty significantly. And nowadays, it's more like what motivates me the most is the fact that I'm making a game with my best friend, and that's just an awesome thing. And to see this through to completion and to see it released when that happens, it's going to be amazing. And that kind of thinking about that goal, that drives me. As for burnout, I think the best thing that I've found is that when I'm sitting in front of a blank FL Studio project and I'm bashing my head against a keyboard, I recharge. I go and listen to a bunch of music, I go and listen to a bunch of albums, I play some games, I kind of recharge my creative batteries, and then once I've gotten away from HorrorVale for a little while, recharge, get back, that usually does the trick.
It's also got to be nice to watch like people let's play the game and see them like bobbing their heads to your music too.
I've got to be honest, I don't get tired of that. When someone's got a face cam and they bob to the music, I think, I've done it. It's awesome. So, next one, from Don't Question the Bobber. Interesting. I'd like to ask what scrapped character / enemy had the most potential but couldn't work out for a variety of reasons, such as the limitations of the software. So I guess has RPG Maker kind of stopped you from doing what you really want to do?
I mean, there are a few cases where RPG Maker has prevented me from doing something. Most of those are um, unrelated to characters. Like, for instance, I really wanted there to be an animated intro in battle. So, if you listen carefully when a battle starts, you'll actually hear like a laugh. And originally, there was going to be a pumpkin that jumped at the screen and laughed at you, and then the battle would start. But in terms of characters, most of the scrapped characters were done just because there were too many. Um, Obviously, we have over 30 party members. It would be insane to add even more than that. There was one case, which I talked about recently, where a character called Minerva was scrapped just because I wanted there to be a sugar party member, and that became Plum. Um, I did also talk a little bit ago about Mask Guy and how his original mechanic was going to be a lot more complex, and I went with something a little more simpler. So I would say that maybe the Mask Guy original concept will count.
Who did you have the most fun designing?
Um, well, I mean, it depends on if you mean like character design wise or conceptual wise. Conceptual wise, I would definitely say Gwen. I love her entire concept. She's a robot. You can change her abilities. She starts out with like garbage stats, like in every degree, and as you equip her with different stuff, you can make her more of a defensive character, an all-around like great character, or like a really offensive character. You can kind of have some fun with her and tune her to your needs. Design wise, though, I would say obviously it was a lot of fun designing the creepies, trying to take these established characters and make designs based off of them that are recognizable but still very distinct. And the Netherlings are also fun because they're kind of a unique thing to HorrorVale that aren't based off of anything. Well, besides, like, some of them are based off of animals, but they're largely a unique type of character. In terms of the party members, not excluding all the patron ones and stuff like that, I would say that honestly, I think my favorite designed character is one that you haven't seen yet, and you won't see until you play the game.
Ooh. Okay. This is a music question on a different note. I like that. What track are you most proud of / think best encapsulates the vibe of the area it appears in? So, Dustin, which track best encapsulates the area it's in?
Oh, I thought you were going to answer this question. But,
We'll go on.
I mean, you know what? I would say that Waltz of the Wisp is a very underrated track because everybody's heard it, so they don't think about it as much. But I think that when you look at it, it really does help the atmosphere and help you figure out what kind of world this is. It's a really great song for the first major area.
I think for me, the one I'm most proud of, it's probably ones that you haven't heard yet. There's a couple that I can think of, a couple for bosses, a couple in areas, tracks that I can't talk about. I'm afraid that's a bad answer.
No, I actually I also really really love the song. It's a very short loop, but it's the song that plays in the third floor of Ludwig's lab, like right before you fight the boss. That one's one of my favorites for sure. It just really sets the mood.
And I think the one for me that best encapsulates the vibe, I really like, or rather, I'm happy with Evergreen Etude, the forest tune. It's very Donkey Kong Country-ish.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very much take a marimba and just slap a ton of reverb on it. That's my favorite kind of sound, and I think it matches the vibe pretty nicely.
Yeah, it's a great song. Although, related to that area, also the Bone Zone is an amazing song.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so good that the original melody, me and my testers didn't lose our minds when it was just the very short loop that played over and over and over again before you completed the track.
Well, see, funnily enough, I was going to get rid of that melody. That was going to go on the pile of scrapped things, but Dustin liked it so much that I was like, okay, I'll do something with this. And evidently that was the right decision. Okay, what about the track you think best encapsulates the vibe of the game as a whole? I'm not, my grammar understanding is no worky there, but is there a track that just encapsulates the HorrorVale vibe?
I mean, I guess Waltz of the Wisp, because it's kind of that, like very Halloweeny tune. Um, I guess also maybe Spooky Swing. That's a pretty iconic song. I mean, it's spooky and it's goofy and it's quirky and you know maybe
I'm
that.
going to go for Spooky Swing as
Yeah,
well. If you were to describe HorrorVale to somebody with music, I think Spooky Swing is how you would do it.
yeah.
This is another one from Don't Question the Bobber. For Matt, what would you think if someone made a cover of one of your tracks? That would be awesome. I certainly hope that happens one day, and I will be eagerly awaiting a cover / remix / arrangement, whatever. Anyone gets my blessing to do whatever they want with the music, it's fine. Go for it. Okay, here's more from Gaming. Dear Dustin and Matt, what advice would you give for making your own game, and what would you say gives the game soul?
Just do it, even
Yep.
if you don't have a lot of experience and you can't make a big game or an extravagant game. Just start from somewhere. Just get in it. Just start learning a program, whether it's RPG Maker or you want to learn to code and like Unity or something like that, or Game Maker. Just go in and start messing around. Even if you make a game about a little banana that jumps on mushrooms or something. And what was the second part again?
What would you say gives the game soul?
Just having passion for making it. I mean, obviously, if you're just jumping into the Unity store and throwing some crap together and throwing it out there for $5, and you're basically, you don't really care about it. It's going to be a very different experience than if it's a game in a world that you love and you want to put everything into.
And I think, related to this question, I think what gives HorrorVale soul is it's unadulteratedly Dustin, is what HorrorVale is. It's just Dustin's favourite stuff in a melting pot of things, in his unique art style and his sense of humour. It's just, that's what makes it so unique.
Yeah.
And if
I guess
you're
that's one
making
way
a
to look at
game,
it.
yeah, if you're making a game, do the same thing. Put all your stuff in a great big melting pot and make it into something you think would be fun. Because that's how HorrorVale came around.
Yeah.
Advice for making your own game as well, it's like Dustin said, just do it. If you've got a laptop or a PC, if you've got time, if you've got those two things, you can do it. Because the amount of resources out there, tutorials, if you can't do art, there's free assets. There's so much stuff out there now that if your only excuse is either not having the hardware or not having the time, which is understandable on both counts. But if you've got those two things, just do it. Just go for it. What do you suggest on getting people to know about your game? How do we get the word out?
Just like share the trailer. I mean, it's a trailer for a reason. It's meant to kind of advertise the game, link people to the Steam store. I don't know. Maybe show them some Let's Plays.
I think just social media, Twitter, word of mouth.
Oh yeah, of course.
That's how these things get around.
Or you could do it,
Hey.
like how Flynn does it, and just draw a bunch of very cursed art and post it on Twitter.
Yep, that's great as well. Art as well, and that's the thing with Twitter engagement. With images and videos, they get way more engagement than just text and hashtags. So,
Yeah.
Hazard asks, dear Dustin and Matt, what was your favourite Patreon character that you worked on?
I guess I kind of already answered this because I said Gwen, but I'm gonna, if we're excluding Gwen,
I can hear the cogs turning.
well, I guess there's different reasons why I like different characters. There are some cases where I just like drawing the character, like Millie, and there's other characters where I had a lot of fun doing their quests, like Chris and Floosh, and is that how you say it? Flush? I think it's Flush. Fletch. Flush.
I've maybe Hazard will correct us at some point, but I've always thought it was floosh. Well, that's what it looks like. It looks like floosh.
And then there's some like Scotty who his quest makes you do something that's completely different from the rest of the game. So I mean, I think that all of them honestly have their own different quirks and things that make each of their quests enjoyable and their characters enjoyable.
Okay, this is a hard one. What's your favourite kind of candy?
Sour Skittles.
Ooh. For me, it's those pink and blue bubblegum bottle things that absolutely destroy your teeth, but they are the best.
Also, they get a bad rap, but I do actually really love candy corn.
I've never had candy corn.
We're gonna send you some sometime.
If there's any Europe gang in the chat right now and you know where candy corn is, tell me and I'll try it. The last one from Hazard. Do you hope to do a sequel to HorrorVale?
Well, we certainly don't have anything to announce right now, but I certainly wouldn't rule out the possibility. HorrorVale's world is like perfectly designed to be very open for sequels and spin-offs and fan games and stuff like that. There's a humongous amount to explore that could not even be explored even in like 20 games. That's, there's so much that could be done with that. So I would say that if you want a sequel to HorrorVale, buy the game and we'll see how it goes from there.
Good answer. Okay, Nessie asks, Dustin, what possessed you to include 30 party members in HorrorVale?
Well, actually, it was originally only 18, counting Alice. But when Matt and I were discussing like crowdfunding options, like regardless of whether it was Kickstarter or Patreon or whatever, we were like, there needs to be a good incentive for people to give us money. And probably the best incentive that you can give somebody is say, hey, you can have your character in a game or something like that. So it just made sense to, when we opened our Patreon, to have that as an option. So I just went with 10 because that was, I felt like, a good number. And then after that, when we were talking about contests and stuff like that, I figured I would just make it, even 30. And so we would have contest Patreon. So if we never did that, then the cast would probably still be 18. It certainly does have its challenges with it, having 30 party members in the game. Not just because of the amount of work that goes into all their movesets and all their animations and stuff like that, but also making sure that the experience of finding these characters and recruiting them doesn't mess up the pacing or make it feel like it's bloated or anything like that.
Okay, next one from the Great Vampire Duane asks, this one's for me. I know Dustin has played RPG Maker games, but I wonder if Matt is familiar with them and if any of them musically had inspired him or had influence on the soundtrack for HorrorVale. I think Lisa probably inspired some of the more ambient tracks, because Lisa's got some really horrible but great ambience. So definitely probably drawn some stuff from Lisa. Definitely Off.
Oh, yeah.
That's a no-brainer. Off, obviously, with the samples. Was it Pepper Steak, the battle theme? Definitely inspired by Off.
You never finished it, though, did you?
No, I never did. And now you've just exposed me, and now I need to go and do that to protect my reputation. Yeah. I can't think of any more off the top of my head. No, I can't think of any more. Okay, Flynn asks, as stupid as it is, how do you two genuinely feel about Scruffy gets a glass of milk? And how out of nowhere that dumb little thing I made so long before I even put it out. How do you feel about Scruffy gets a glass of milk this time?
I'm happy to see any kind of fan game, even goofy ones like that.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I think it's great. anyone taking HorrorVale stuff and doing their own thing, I love it. And Scruffy Gets Milk is just, it's a pioneer. It's the first of its kind. So it has its place in the Museum of HorrorVale. Here we go, Scott. Question from Matt. When will HorrorVale music be put on Spotify? The answer is when the game is done. That's when I've decided to, because it costs to put music on Spotify. So I'm going to wait until the whole soundtrack's done, and it's just going to go on all together. So that's the plan right now, I'm afraid.
It's kind of weird that the musicians have to pay to be on Spotify.
Yeah, it's not an extortionate amount of money, but it's the kind of thing where if I'm gonna pay for that, I'll wait until it's all it's all done. I'm sorry, Scott. I'm so sorry. Why don't you just download the soundtrack on Bandcamp? Why don't you just use MP3s like a normal person? Come on, Scott. You can even get it in FLAC if you're weird. I know Spotify very normal. Anyway, I feel like I'm disappointed Scott now. Right, so we're through the pre-asked questions. So for the remaining, I think 20 minutes, about there. For the remaining 20 minutes, we'll take whatever questions we get in the live chat. So if you have any burning questions, ask away, and we will do our best. All right, Stoney asks, do you regret choosing RPG Maker VX Ace?
Well, in some ways, I do regret choosing RPG Maker in general because of the limitations, because of the fact that it means that if I want to re-release the game on consoles or something later, I would basically need to remake the game entirely from the ground up. But also at the same time, because RPG Maker is so easy to use and so easy to get started, I have to question if I would even have gotten this far had I picked something else. I feel like I would have just gotten frustrated and given up. In terms of the type of RPG Maker VXS, I basically only chose that because Lisa was made in it. I wasn't. There's so many options and different versions, and I was like, well, I can't imagine that I will want to do anything more than what's in Lisa, so I'll just go with what they have. And plus, it was cheaper. MV was very expensive at the time.
Okay, Scott asks, who has been the hardest party member to balance?
Well, I would say this answer is probably going to get very boring, but probably Gwen, because of the balancing isn't even done yet, but she's definitely going to be a pretty difficult character to get right because of all the increased variables from all the changes. There's some other characters that have received buffs or debuffs and things like that over time. Barnaby, for instance, still needs to be buffed. He's kind of a pretty crap character right now. Kenneth was actually kind of a bad character who's increased some buffs by having really high evasion now. Wendy is a character that's going to get some revamps later on because all her moves are kind of basically the same. I would say probably it's hard to really say right now because, like I said, the character isn't fully implemented yet, but I imagine that Chris and Tannerjar will also be kind of a little bit difficult to balance because of the gimmick with Chris and Tannerjar. Or I think that's actually not the right way to say it. It's like Tenharyar or something like that.
Another one from gaming. If you really want to have HorrorVale on other platforms other than PC, what game engine would you think about using? And do you know any programmers who could do that?
Well, I've looked at some options. If I'm going to learn an engine, I would want to have it be something that I can then use for other things very different from HorrorVale. For instance, I've looked into Unity. Godot seems pretty good. A lot of people are talking about that. Unfortunately, I don't know any programming though. So when that time comes, I'll basically have to learn things from the ground up. And if HorrorVale sells well, then obviously I can, hire programmers to help out. But I don't really know anyone close to me who is a programmer. But I guess we'll see what happens.
Okay, Octo asks, are there any second thoughts about how the characters and / game are designed visually that you think would be too hard to go back and change?
I wouldn't say that any of the characters are designed in such a way that I couldn't go back and change them if I wanted to. I'm pretty happy with all of the character designs in the game. There's not really a time where I'm like, oh, I need to go back and just completely change it. There's been a few times where sprites have been updated character design-wise. I haven't really felt the need to do that. Visually, I guess that some of the earlier areas, like the town, could maybe be designed better. I was basically learning from scratch how to do level design, so it's kind of it's a little bit of a mess, the first areas. So, but at the same time, I'm like so attached to those areas that I don't want to do too significant changes. But I did change a good chunk of it with getting rid of the Forgotten Man. Well, I didn't get rid of the Forgotten Mansion. I moved it, but removing it from Act 1 was definitely a significant change. But I don't really know if I'll ever change anything else in Act 1 that significantly.
Another one from gaming. How does it feel to have a fandom for your game? And what will you do if your fan base gets so huge, like Undertale or something?
Honestly, I think it's great. It's even when I was a kid, I wanted to make cartoons or comics because I wanted to have, like a community around that. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say that it doesn't feel great to have a whole bunch of people who draw fan art for you and come and listen to you do a stupid Q&A, and it does feel great. I mean, in terms of if HorrorVale gets so big like Undertale, well, first of all, I really sincerely doubt, maybe close, because Undertale's kind of an anomaly. But if it did get that big, I would just keep on doing like I'm always doing. Maybe the Discord would have a lot more mods.
I love the fandom, the idea that there's something that I've been a creative part of that people enjoy and show their enjoyment for it by, like Dustin saying, making fan art or just being a participant in the Discord. It's very humbling, and I'm really grateful for everyone's support, and I'm just excited for the rest of the development and the release and all that stuff that's ahead of us, and yeah, really grateful. That's how it makes me feel. Okay, we're getting pretty close to the end here. We've got about 10 minutes left. Octo says, oh no, sorry JMW, I just nearly skipped your question. I think this is for both of us. What's your thought process behind making music, either for characters, locations, etc.? Well, the process begins with Dustin. So Dustin, tell the people what you do when you want a track.
So if I want a track, I usually will find songs that kind of get across the vibe that I want, and I'd send them to Matt. Like, for instance, this one is a real throwback, but like we were talking about Waltz of the Wisp. Like, I think that I think I sent him the This Is Halloween song to kind of get across the vibe that I wanted for that song. That's usually how it starts. I mean, I think there's a few cases where he just kind of, did whatever because I didn't necessarily have examples in mind. But generally, I have like examples that I give him.
Yeah, and then once Dustin's turned that over to me, I'll give him a good listen. Probably listen to them on repeat for a while, get the vibe in my head. And actually, the creative process differs between tracks, but the ones that have come together the easiest, I actually get away from my PC, I get away from my desk, and I just sort of think about it and maybe hum a tune or sing a tune or get my guitar out and play some chords. And then once I've got an idea, once I've got like a basic framework in my head, I can then get back to my desk and start dressing up that melody, choosing instruments. Obviously it's different if it's an ambient track. If it's an ambient track, I'll just find cool sound and start layering them together, kind of like a collage. If a normal track is like a detailed painting, an ambient track is just like a collage where you just stick loads of stuff on. It's like, what looks cool here? It's a bit more messy, kind of more broad strokes. It's different. And then I'll usually make a work in progress track, maybe half the length of what it ought to be, send it to Dustin, see what he thinks, take the feedback, and so on and so forth until it's done. I think we've got 2 left here. JMW says, what usually comes first? Creating a character and then implementing them? Or do you see the limitations of the game first and then create characters around that?
Well, obviously the characters come first. There are characters right now who have been like a concept since 2018 and they're not in the game yet. Because I pretty much rather than like, for instance, like make all the characters at the beginning and then put them in places, I don't make the characters until the areas that they are in are finished. For instance, I'm doing characters right now that, like Millie and other patron characters who I couldn't do before because the area that they were in wasn't ready yet. And then you have some like Jack, who you can find in the main town. So he got in pretty early.
It's alright, I just muted my mic because it's absolutely chucking it down outside, so you might hear the rain. Gaming asks, are you ever worried that your game won't get big? I say because there are a lot of streamers and YouTubers playing your game. I feel you wouldn't be worried for it not being big.
There certainly is a worry. I mean, there is a genuine possibility that we put the game out there and it doesn't really get that much bigger than it is, and we hardly even make back what we put into it. But I try not to dwell on that kind of stuff. I don't like to get bogged down with what ifs and maybes. I just kind of keep going, and we'll see what happens.
Good answer. I think for me as well, just seeing it to its completion, even if it launches with a whimper rather than a bang, I will still be very, very satisfied. Just the whole journey that it's been making HorrorVale, and even if it's only sort of you guys, the loyal few who enjoy it and play it, that would still be great. Okay, have we got more? Scott, I'm not going to humour you, I'm afraid. Sorry about that. Jack, what area was your favourite to design, and what Act 1 boss was your favourite?
Honestly, I think that my favorite area to design was an area in Act 3. It's called the Beguiling Bog. And it was also the most difficult area to put in, but it was also the most fun. Because I find that the more that I work on the game and learn level design, the way better I get at it. So I would think that the newer areas are, obviously better than the previous ones. In terms of Act 1 bosses, well, first of all, there's actually only one Act 1 boss. But if you mean the mini bosses, definitely Grave Hands. I love Grave Hands. I love watching YouTubers get very mad at Grave Hands. And then that they have that aha moment, and it's usually they're like, oh, okay, I figured out how to do it. Or they're like, and they get like, they start insulting themselves.
Yeah, I also thoroughly enjoy watching people struggle at Grave Hands, which is hypocritical, because if I was on the receiving end of Grave Hands and I wasn't involved in the development, I would hate that. I would hate that so much. But because I'm behind the curtain, I quite enjoy watching people get there. So, okay, last two, I'll say these will be the last two questions then, one from Gaming. Oh wait, Octo's one as well, and Nessie, okay, three. We'll try and cram three in and keep these questions short. Gaming, do you have any tips on learning how to design characters and drawing backgrounds and places?
Practice. I mean, that's really all you can do. I certainly did not start knowing how to design anything. Character design-wise, I've been designing characters since I was a little kid. So, I mean, it's certainly not something that you just can innately know. You have to practice.
Okay, Octo says, which HorrorVale continent do you guys think would be the coolest for a sequel if it wasn't Tartarus?
All of them. Next question.
Good. Nessie says, Dustin and Matt, when will you add subtitles to the Mothman Means Business video? I can only make out half the words. We'll get on that. I'll put that on a list. I can do that this week.
See why not.
Let's do that. And that is it. We're done.
Yeah.
And that's
rounded off
quite
questions.
nicely.
This was fun.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks for all your questions.
This was a lot of fun. I would love to maybe do another one of these one day before the game releases.
Yeah, we'll definitely do another one sort of closer to release, like a pre-release Q&A. That'll be cool.
All right. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We're gonna end it here. I hope you guys all have a great Halloween. Bye-bye.